Hello, and welcome to the Applicant Podcast. I'm Rebecca Tripp, and today I have Erin O'Farrell with me. Erin, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me, Rebecca.
I'm looking very forward to this conversation today with a fellow paralegal. So why don't we start off with you quickly introducing yourself and telling us just a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. My name's Erin O'Farrell. I'm a tea drinker. I love yoga. And actually, my pre-pandemic life, I taught indoor cycling as well. So that was always, I had my desk job where I'm just laser focused on my computer screen all day, and then I get to go and yell at a room of 20 people for an hour. So that's always was always a good thing for me. Nice to have an outlet. You got to have an outlet. So I like to have a full plate, lots of things on the go. Right now I'm on maternity leave with my second one. Otherwise, professionally, I have a couple of things ongoing. And the one that I'm most proud of is the work that I'm doing to advocate on behalf of injured workers in WSIB matters.
Amazing. Yeah. So why don't we start from the beginning and you can explain a little bit about your educational background and educational journey.
Sure. Now, this is definitely a multi-point answer for me.
Yeah.
Out of high school, I went straight into college. I took photojournalism for one semester, and it was just, I took that because I had no clue what I wanted to do, no idea at all. And then I took a year and a half off. And the only reason really I went straight out of high school was because my father told me, if you don't go to post-secondary school now, and get something under your belt, you never will. But the joke's on him, because I did go back and I really haven't stopped since. So I ended up taking, after that first semester, I took a year and a half off, and then I went to university. And still, I had no idea what I wanted to study. And a good friend of mine said, when you go to college, you sign up for the program and you take the courses that they tell you to take. But when you go to university, you apply for a program you think you'll get in for, and then you take whatever classes you want to and figure out what you like. So that's what I did. I applied for English, I got in for English, and after my first semester, I changed to psychology. So I graduated from that program in 2008, and that was, I'm from Windsor, so that was at the University of Windsor. I just went locally here. And I was working in insurance at the time, and I started studying to get my designation. I did the Canadian Accredited Insurance Brokers courses and obtained that designation. That was in 2009, 2010. And then the year after, I started the Chartered Insurance Professionals designation, which I think I ended up going back to college before I finished that. Feels like it was an entire lifetime ago. So then it was 2015. I started at Mohawk College for the paralegal program, and that was condensed. So I started in the winter, and then a year and a few extra months after that, I was finished my program. And that summer, I wrote the exam, and in the fall of 2016 is when I got my license. I decided to keep studying and do the immigration consultant program through Humber. So I did that completely online, finished it in 2019. And then last summer, I wrote the entry to practice exam and passed that. So right now I'm undergoing the gruesome licensing process.
Yeah, it is gruesome.
Yeah. Not for the faint of heart.
Yeah, we have a lot of parallels with our background, with like the paralegal program, the university degree, then Humber for the immigration consultant program. So I really agree with your educational choices, and I can see why you did them. Can you explain a little bit about how you decided on your educational programs and journey? Like, how did you get from A to B and where you are now?
Sure. When I first started at university, like I said, I took a bunch of different courses. I always loved, thinking about when someone does something and you're like, why did that person do that? And I don't mean it just like as an exasperated, sentiment, but as an actual question of like, hey, why did they do that? What's their motivation? What's their perspective, and things like that. So psychology really appealed to me. And if I was really happy that I took that program. I never thought that I would, be a psychologist, but it's something you truly can apply to any type of work you end up doing. You're interacting with people in some form, and, it really, aids you in no matter what you end up doing. Mm-hmm. And from the amount of resources over the years that I've dedicated to education, I probably could have earned a master's degree, if you added up all those hours together, but then I wouldn't have the same variety that I ended up with. So I'm not sure if I could go back and do it again, if I would make that change.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I ended up with the paralegal program because I thought, I got into insurance when I was like 18, 19, and I didn't want to do that until I retired. I thought that's too young. That's too many years to be in one line of work. When I was younger, I kind of wanted to be a lawyer. So I decided to make that change, kind of pull the trigger and go back to school for the paralegal program as an alternative to being in the field of law.
Amazing. Yeah. Again, I can really relate to that thought process. Kind of said that you wouldn't do anything differently, and I agree. You probably could have had a master's. I too probably could have had a master's after all the education that I've done. But is there anything, that you would have done differently looking back and seeing where you are now, or are you content with like kind of how everything turned out?
You know what? That question seems so straightforward at first, but when I really think about it, it's like pulling at a loose thread. All that, like, there are times where I'm like, I wish I did something with my hands. I wish I did something creative. I wish I just went for a trade. Like, I've gone through like pretty much any option that's out there. I've had a moment where I was like, I really wish I had gone into this kind of work. So those are all fleeting, and ultimately, if I could go back and do it again, I wouldn't, because I would be just as clueless as I was the first time around, to be perfectly honest. If I had to go back and do something different, I think I would have gone the law school route and become a lawyer, since that's something I wanted to do when I was young. Really, the only reason I didn't was because I didn't have a specific goal of practicing a particular type of law. And
Right.
that kind of mentally, it was kind of a barrier to investing myself into that whole process of writing the LSATs and going through that. It's not an easy process, right? Going through law school and articling, and it's for sure a lot of work. And I just couldn't invest myself in it because I didn't have a clear picture of what my goals would be if I went that route. Now I know that that's something I need to work on, is I need to learn to just pull the trigger and jump in, even when I don't have all the information, because you never will know everything under the sun, right? So I need to learn to just kind of embrace that and do it regardless. And I know that if I had gone to law school, you figure out those finer details along the way. You don't need to know everything up front. So it's a good life lesson.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting that, as a paralegal, I'm sure you've gotten the question of why didn't you go to law school? It's something that we get, all the time, is why aren't you a lawyer? And I too, for various reasons, decided to not go the law school route and did the paralegal and immigration consultant program instead. And I too think that there's a couple barriers as to why I didn't pull that trigger. But essentially, at the end of the day, you and I are both doing things that we love to do. We're in areas of law that we enjoy working in. And I think like that's the main goal. So regardless of going to paralegal school, immigration, or immigration consultant school, or law school, we're still working in law, and just in a different capacity. But I find that really interesting that like the barrier for you is that you just couldn't decide on like what area of law. And I think the only way really to figure that out is to then work in that area of law and
Exactly.
like it.
Exactly. And that's why the paralegal route appealed to me so much, is that, okay, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do,
Yeah.
but it's not as big of an investment. So I was able to kind of mentally get myself on board with making this change, even though I didn't have those facts. But I'm glad that I went the route that I did ultimately.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I completely agree. So moving forward, you've also had quite an interesting career so far. So can you walk us through some of the various roles and responsibilities that you've had since graduation?
Definitely. So as I mentioned or alluded to, working in the legal field is actually a second career for me.
Mhm.
I started in insurance the summer before I went for my undergrad. Locally, there's a call center brokerage that they needed someone for, a data entry administrative sort of position. So which was perfect for me. They were busier in the summer when I had fewer courses, and they were, not as busy in the winter or when I would be in school. So it was a perfect arrangement for when I was a student. And as soon as I graduated, I moved into a sales role, and then I did internal new business underwriting, which was interesting. And I did corporate training as well, which I enjoyed. After that, I relocated with my now husband, and I transitioned to the traditional brokerage side as opposed to the call center. And then from there, I left that brokerage and went into underwriting. I started with personal lines, and then I grew into commercial auto. So I've kind of been all over the place. I did each of those underwriting positions for a couple of years before I decided to pull the trigger and go back to school and make that change. Like I said, I got into insurance when I think I was 19, and it's just, I'm like, I can't count the years it would take until I retire doing just insurance. It's very interesting if you really know insurance and you kind of understand the business of it. It is quite interesting, and risk analysis and things like that. But again, not something I just wanted to do until I retired.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating. I think also with insurance, it has a lot of parallels with law, right? Like it is
Definitely.
fact. It is, reading the fine print of things. So
Yes.
for me, I think that makes complete sense why you went from insurance, like right into the paralegal profession.
Yeah, to me, a lot of people don't see it, but see that analogy that you've made. But for me, it almost felt, organic, because it is so similar. In both cases, a lot of things turn on those details, and the details are very important.
Yeah, absolutely. So with, anything, there's struggles and successes in order to, get to where you are now. Would you be able to explain a little bit about any struggles or successes that you've had throughout your career so far?
Sure. Within the paralegal community, it's no secret that finding full-time employment within the paralegal scope is a very difficult thing to do. I've been quite fortunate. I did my field placement with the prosecutor's office. And once I graduated, I actually started working right away, one of my instructors at her law firm. So I started at intake, and then I quickly moved over to coordinating their examinations for discovery. So I was in the litigation unit, and it's a very, very busy firm. I won't pretend that, it's been a few years since I left. I won't pretend that I can remember the numbers of how many matters were ongoing, but I can definitely share that when we relocated back to our hometown of Windsor. And when I was interviewing for positions locally, I told a couple of the interviewing lawyers that how many matters were ongoing, how many matters I was responsible for at that stage of litigation. And I am as certain as I can be that they thought I was lying. So that's how busy it was. They're like, no lawyer has that many matters open at once. I can assure you they do. So it was busy enough that my full-time job was, affidavits and documents and scheduling discoveries and prep meetings. And that was more than a full-time job for sure. But, I worked my tail off, and the partner that I worked for supported me while I continued to work for him full-time, also making time to work per diem with the prosecutor's office that I had done my placement with. So I was very fortunate that I had that experience, and I felt like I was working about 12 days a week, but I would take a day or two off every single week and go to a different jurisdiction and prosecute matters there. And then I would have to work extra long days to get my work at the law firm done, or go in on the weekend, or, whatever it took to get everything done, to kind of get my feet wet in different areas and see what I liked.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I think you did touch on a really good point that, as a paralegal, we are able to have our own clients and be a representative, but it is super difficult to find full-time employment in our scope of practice. And yeah, the way you tackled that was, what an amazing learning opportunity. But it is very challenging to navigate that, especially in the paralegal program. They really set you up to just open up your own practice, and that's not for everyone, right?
No, it's not. And even a lot of times there are so many matters where, you can't take a matter on unless you're competent to take it on, or you can become competent to take it on. But sometimes it's a matter of you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And so you're not sure, you're not aware that you're not competent. You think you are, and then the matter goes sideways and it's too late. You know, you've done some damage on your client's matter. So that's something that's always kind of, I've had a little bit of fear about, maybe a little bit of hesitant to just right out of the gate go out on my own.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's a healthy fear. Like, I think it's a fear that I think everyone has as well. Like,
Yes.
and if you aren't fearful of that, then like maybe you have to take a step back.
Yes, perhaps you're overconfident, and that's kind of, I like to think I'm in that sweet spot where I'm not overconfident, but I'm also not doubtful of my abilities and of the knowledge and experience that I do have. But also, I mean, in the years since I've graduated, I've met so many great people and made a lot of contacts. And I'm not sure that I would have still made those same contacts if I had just started working for myself out of the gate. But also, I wouldn't have the same amount of contacts if any issues arose early on to, pick someone's brain, have a sounding board of just talking something out, this is my strategy. Does it make sense to you? Things like that. Where now I have a lot more contacts of people that I could do that with.
Yeah. Yeah. Networking is very important, not just from a like referral standpoint, but from, yeah, making sure that you have a sounding board for when you do need a sounding board. Like, I think that's really important.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So what advice do you have? And I guess we've kind of already dove into this, but what advice do you have for those wanting to become a licensed paralegal or a regulated Canadian immigration consultant?
For either of those professions, I would, like we already touched on it, but I would definitely say connect as much as you can. I'll listen to a podcast episode, and if there's a guest that I enjoy, I reach out to that person and I tell them that I enjoyed their episode, and that's how I connected with you. That you were on opposite off the tracks, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I really enjoyed that episode, so I reached out to you and we connected, and had some great conversations since then. And I will say, or I will add to that, that I spent, like, for years, I've always done things like that. That's kind of just in my nature. I wouldn't say I'm an overly social person, but I like to connect with people and make that sincere comment of, what I liked about it was this subject matter, or what I like about your experience, or what I appreciate about your background is this specific thing. Then I like to genuinely share that with someone. And for a few years, I really didn't have too many genuine connections through that, but lately I have been connecting with so many great people, and I don't know if it's just the social media algorithms maybe are finally in my favor. Who knows? But it's really been hitting the mark lately.
Yeah.
Other than that, I would add to do your own research, especially when you're brand new, you're fresh out of school. You were always told, your assignments and things like that, this is what you need to research, this is what you need to look up. But then one day you have your own client and you don't really know what the issue is, and you don't really know the key terms, and you don't really know the legislation that's at play, and there's so many things that you don't know. And it's so easy to ask a colleague who's senior in the field who might know. It's easy to ask a lawyer that you work for or work with. It's easy to post in a social media forum and ask for what the answer is. And so few times where I see someone posting in those social media groups and things like that, that they don't add, I looked at this legislation and this is a section number I think applies. Am I on the right track? Or is there anything you would add that I should look into, and things like that? So it's very valuable to right off the bat. And it can be as easy as just, hopping on Canly, try to look for a matter that's similar and see what legislation they refer to. It'll give you the section number and everything, and kind of be able to go from there. So it can be kind of intimidating, and your very first step that you do shouldn't be to ask anyone else. It should just be, see how far you get on your own. And even if the answer is that you don't get anywhere on your own, then so be it. At least you made that attempt. And in the future, you'll learn from that a lot quicker and be able to kind of answer your own questions a lot quicker.
Yeah, yeah, I couldn't agree more. I find that You're right. With social media and like with connections and stuff, it is very easy to just be like, hey, what do you think about this? But there is a skill that comes with being able to research on your own. And that should be the default first step, right? Is to
Exactly.
see if you can, go back through your notes and go back through, maybe past cases that you've worked on. You don't know what you don't know, but you also can't remember everything. So
Exactly.
if you're working in an area of law, it's possible that you've already worked on something similar to what you're facing now, and you just kind of have to refresh your mind. But yeah, no,
Yes,
I completely agree with that. I think legal research is definitely a daunting task, but
for
once you
sure.
can tackle it and you can like own it, it's a very valuable tool to have.
Oh, definitely. I would just to, if I could summarize that up, I would say that, the people you work with, your colleagues, your social media avenues should be an enhancement of
Mm,
your own attempts to research. It shouldn't. So your default is to do your own. Even like I said, you don't get anywhere, you can't find anything, then you reach out. You'll learn so much more from what you're doing so much quicker than if your default is to ask other people. So try to use those tools to enhance your own skills.
absolutely. So you've worked in the legal industry for a few years now. And I'm wondering if, from your experience, is there anything that you wish you could change with just like a wave of a wand, if you could?
You know what, it's pretty complicated, like my answer to this, but in general, I would say in scope experience for paralegals,
Yeah.
um, or even the requirement that people have to have experience for a particular job. So few people are, they require 5 years in real estate, or, which isn't even in the paralegal scope, but a lot of paralegals end up working as legal assistants or law clerks, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's not necessarily what they set out to do when they went back to school or when they went to school for the paralegal program. So a lot of people fall into those jobs and end up really enjoying them, and that's fantastic. But it still doesn't change the fact that you need experience to get into those roles. And there's a lot of people that are new coming out of college, and it's a hard question to answer of where do you start. If like I said, I was very fortunate to have a field placement that could not have been, there's not another field placement option that I would have been more ecstatic to have gotten. I was so fortunate. And an instructor that I connected with quite well, and that she worked at a law firm where they were hiring at the right time, and all those things. There are a lot of people that just aren't as lucky. It's just dumb luck that it kind of fell into that. But I don't really know what the answer, like what's the solution to those issues. I mean, it could even be CPDs tailored to new paralegals. There's a lot for people who practice in landlord and tenant law. There's a lot of people for people who practice in small claims. But what about CPD primers for people who want to get into specific areas? For, okay, you're taking your first client, and there's materials available on opening your first matter and managing that matter, and all those kinds of details, but not so much in particular how it applies to certain areas, and it can be very different from one area to the next. So yeah, either the availability for that or the possibility to get in scope experience for paralegals, those are very important things. And I'm sure lots of other people out there have made the same observation, that there's a considerable gap between textbooks and classroom learning and providing legal services in the real world.
Oh.
It's like a shocking difference, as it is in many fields, like it's just such a difference. I mean, as we talked about already, paralegals, and I suspect lawyers as well, they can only undertake matters they're competent to handle or can become competent to handle. But you can't always assess your own competence. It's really the only method we have. But if you don't know what you don't know, right? So if there were primers or intros too, that you'd have a bit better of a foundation going into it, and you'd be able to recognize, okay, this doesn't quite fit what I would normally do, without having to, have some years of practice or providing legal services under your belt in order to obtain that CPDs could provide a foundation where you'd be able to more easily and readily recognize those circumstances.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I really like about the paralegal profession is that we have to take 12 hours of CPDs a year. And I remember in school, some people were like, man, like we're just always going to be learning and like we still have to do school after we graduate. And it's like, well, yeah, because like law is always changing.
Exactly.
And you can't know everything. Like no one knows everything. And I personally love CPDs as a way to continue my development. And I think that's just like the student in me that I enjoy learning. But I do think it's important to be mindful of like, you know what, I should take a step back. I should take a CPD and then come back to this and see if I look at it in a different way.
Yeah, with fresh eyes.
Yeah, yeah. I think CPDs are they're just so important. And I think they're underutilized. I think they are a really valuable tool.
At the beginning of the pandemic, when the Law Society opened up a lot of, I think they were mostly CPDs that were a bit older, but they opened a lot of them up with at no cost. And I was on maternity leave with my first child, and I was in like my heyday. Any of my downtime was like, I'll just pop on a CPD. Like,
Yeah, I did the exact same thing. I did the exact same thing. They did one on having a law practice and like technology and things going remote.
yes,
And that's when that was like kind of new to have like a remote virtual law office. And
yeah.
now that's common. And there's still things from that CPD that I can utilize still. No, I completely agree. I signed on to all of them as well.
Yeah, it's like everything I can, put it in my basket.
Yeah,
And I still got some that I haven't gotten to. I was actually thinking just the other day, I have to go back and see which ones that I haven't listened to yet, or ones that I want to listen to again.
yeah, no, there's so many good ones out there for sure. So the last question I have is a little bit more general, but I'm wondering if you have one piece of advice that you would give to your 18-year-old self if she was standing right in front of you.
You know what? I would say that people won't necessarily recognize your transferable skills.
Mm,
Kind of, I alluded to that earlier when you said that, insurance and being in the legal field, being a paralegal, they're so similar, and they are, but there's so many people that don't recognize that. And
mm,
to me, it's so obvious. So when I'm, I'll be crafting my resume, or, connecting with someone new. And if to me it seems obvious and they don't see the value in, I worked in insurance for a decade, I want people to see the value in that.
mhm.
So I've come to realize that you need to be aware of your own skills and be able to demonstrate them, and, still remain humble, but there's no shame in advocating for yourself and just in day-to-day matters. It's not just a matter of going through the interview process, and no, you need to find an opportunity to share, how is that skill, how is your past experience transferable. And I mean, not every insurance broker, not every underwriter took those same skills away or had the same skill set in the same role compared to you. Same
Mhm.
thing goes if you were in, if you were a server at a restaurant, not everyone develops the same skills of connecting with their clients, or being as detailed, being as thorough, being as reliable. Not everyone takes those same things away from that role or develops the same skills in that role. So being able to kind of paint that picture for others, and, making sure that others know just how valuable you are.
Yeah. And using that example of a restaurant, being a server, I had a teacher who said, what's a better experience to transfer those skills than being a restaurant in a fast-paced environment, working in a restaurant in a fast-paced environment, and working in a law office, which is a fast-paced environment, being able to multitask. And I remember thinking like, yeah, that makes sense. And I never put those two together until she said it. And
Right.
I think you're right that you have to advocate for yourself and somewhat in some extent like lay it out, right? Like they won't make that assumption of this job equaled this skill. You do have to lay it out. And I think the exercise of going through your resume and doing that for yourself, you might actually realize that there's more skills that you can utilize and explain that, you wouldn't have already known if you didn't first write it out and look at it. So yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice for sure.
Hopefully someone else thinks so too.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to sit with me today and have this conversation. I personally love being able to talk to a fellow paralegal and immigration consultant. I don't know how many of us there are out there, but it's great to know someone that has both professions that they're working in. So thank you for sitting down, opening up about all these things. I think we could easily have another podcast episode and just keep this going, but thank you for today. I do really appreciate it.
Me as well. It's always nice speaking with you, Rebecca. So hopefully we'll be able to do it again another time.